crazy. Mars bursting in there with the rocket red glare, rapping USA, so she go crazy. Wait for it, 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 wait for it.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning into Latino Free Minds. I am your host, Gio, and today I have an exciting guest. Um, he is the son of a Navy pilot and survivor of the Pacific Palisade fires. He knows service and struggle firsthand with executive leadership roles at the Walt Disney Company and Amazon, and degrees from Stanford and Berkeley Law. He has spent years solving complex, real world problems inside two of the most customer obsessed organizations on the planet. When he speaks about insurance, it's not political jargon, it's operational knowledge. He talks about bureaucracy, fraud, waste, customer experience failures, housing pressures, and the crushing cost increase that hit everyday Californians. He understands that insurance is not an abstract issue. It decides whether families can rebuild after disaster, afford a home, or stay financially stable. Crucially, he's not a career politician. He doesn't need a title or the status that politics can bring. He's stepping forward because California's system is broken and because he believes it can be fixed through competence, accountability, and genuine leadership. In a political era dominated by talking points, he feels refreshingly different, informed, measured, experienced, and focused on solving the problems that actually affect people's daily lives. His name, ladies and gentlemen, I'm very excited to have him here today, is Merritt Farren.
Thanks so much, Gio. Really appreciate you
Merritt,
having me on.
I'm very grateful that you have agreed to come on to Latino Free Minds. Um, this is an interview that I've been wanting to do for a long time, and I'm glad that this month I was able to free up some time to make phone calls and bring some folks in, especially on this in these last few weeks before June 2nd. Obviously, voting has started, and hopefully there's going to be a lot, not a lot, but the folks that get to hear today's episode, hopefully there's some regret if they didn't vote for you. You could still go down to the elections office, get that ballot switched out. What you do is you go down there, let them know you've already voted. They'll give you a ballot to fill in, and when everything gets sorted out, they'll throw out your old ballot and put your new one in. So just in
Yeah, that's
case.
that's a really good point, Gio. Thank you for mentioning that, and thank you for mentioning that to everybody who's tuning in.
Absolutely. Well, you never know because sometimes there's large organizations that will endorse a certain candidate, and some folks don't even tune in, and then they see Latino Free Minds and they go, "I really like that Merritt guy. I like him more than that lady I don't really know about." And I don't want to talk bad about anybody, but um, I'm glad to have you here, Merritt.
Thank you. Look, and thank you for the generous introduction. It summarizes in many ways why I'm here, right? So, as you pointed out, I'm not a politician. I'm here because I, like so many, have been frustrated with the direction of the state, and specifically with us electing into power people who, quite frankly, don't have the background for the positions
Exactly.
they're going into, right? And no matter how good somebody's intentions may be for any job, doesn't matter what it is, right? If you don't have the background for your job, you're not going to be good at it. It takes work and effort and time on task to develop skills.
You know, you bring up a good point because you come to the table with a resume that is more impressive than most people I've ever seen. especially for the position that you're moving into. I when I talk to folks, because they'll call me and they go, "Hey, I saw your video about who you think we should vote for. I've never heard of this guy Merritt, but I also heard you say he's overqualified. What, so why should he take the job?" I'm like, because he's passionate about the position.
I have to say, Joe, it is kind of funny because I spoke to a woman recently who's quite highly placed in an organization that is trying to make California better in general. That's their mission. And I have to admit, she looked a little skeptical, like, you're too good for this position. Like, people like you don't run. And so I had to kind of laugh about that. But yeah, look, I came into this out of passion. I wouldn't be here if my community hadn't been burned down, and if after the disaster and the destruction of our community, we hadn't all dealt with an incredibly broken insurance system. And, I looked for ways to help the community. I knew that if I just jumped in and did something, that would raise spirits, because I'll tell you, this wasn't as bad as every single wildfire tragedy has been in the state. I would argue this one is even worse because it had this extra component of being preventable, right?
Exactly.
This one, happened because people messed up.
On
And
on
that
on on multiple fronts,
uh,
Merritt.
multiple fronts, and that's even more disheartening for people, right? And
Exactly.
I feel, along with having a state that runs well, we need a population that feels good about being here, feels good about themselves, feels good about their communities. So I looked for a way to jump in and help. As you know, I jumped in. Your listeners, viewers may not know, I jumped into the State Farm rate proceedings because I determined that you could do that as a citizen advocate. And with my background, I was well suited to do that. The Department of Insurance objected. State Farm objected. Not surprisingly, I was surprised at the Department of Insurance, but the judge let me in. He said, "Look, Merritt, your background really could be meaningfully helpful here
Yeah.
because you come with a different perspective, and a perspective of a company, companies, as you said, that know that you can do right by the customer and make money, right? That those two things actually help out of each other. They work together. They don't work against each other." And so that then led me to getting urged by friends to jump into the race. I was not anxious to do so. I'm not a politician. But when I looked at the other candidates, with all due respect to the other candidates, I saw that, none of them are senior lawyers, right? And you've got to be a senior lawyer to be successful here. And none of them have the sort of experience that I've had in innovation and technology.
I you know you bring up a lot of interesting points, and I feel like I can go two routes here. We can either talk about um, the experience, the how you have built up the experience that you have, but you also brought up something that I wasn't really planning on getting into until a little bit later, was some of the aftermath that you have had to deal with because of the Palisades fire, um, leading to you fighting for fighting for victims of the insurance company. Um, do you want to get into
Yeah, let's
the?
talk about that a little bit, because I think it's important for your viewers, everybody tuned in.
I,
I think everybody's aware of the fact that we do have this major insurance crisis going on. To your
right,
point, to me, and the more I've looked at this, it's about affordability, right? And I've lived in this state since I was 9 years old. I was actually born here. We moved to East Coast because my father's a Navy pilot, was stationed back there for a while. Then we came back. I love this state. It's a fantastic state. But I grew up in a time when it was easy to be middle class, to have a decent salary, not a big salary, and to live well. And I think that's become really hard in the state. Housing is too expensive, everything's too expensive. And it's driving great people out. And I hate seeing that. I want to see the population here grow, not
right.
decline. I want to see great people be able to live their dream. And so that's really what this is about. So yeah, insurance around homes, a disaster right now. I mean, truly, you can't
Exactly.
get the coverage you want. Well, if you can get coverage, it's incredibly expensive. Auto insurance for everybody, right? The state says if you have a car, you have to have insurance. So it's not even optional. And yet, many people have seen their auto insurance rates double, triple, and people can't afford that, right? People are in a situation like, am I going to pay my rent or my auto insurance? That's not okay. And for businesses, workers' comp insurance has gone way up, and small companies are really struggling with workers' comp because what they will find is they have some sort of a claim. They want to fight it. The insurance company doesn't want to bother. They pay it off and then they treat the company like they're a problem and they raise their rates. Apartment owners. I've spoken to apartment owners, and if you can believe this, right? So lots of apartment owners are small family owned apartment owners. They have 6 units, 10 units. They're not super well to do. And the insurance companies will be saying to them, we've done a survey of your apartment and we think you need to make these changes. You need to put on a new roof so it won't flood. And so they mandate this incredibly expensive remodel. And then they still get canceled, right? The insurance company says, if you don't do this, we're going to cancel you. They spend all this money and they get canceled. So, and then health insurance, I don't need to start about that, I'm sure, for anyone who's watching, right? It is a major, major problem. And we have got to fix that. So to be clear, the commissioner of insurance for California, this role that I'm will hopefully be in, does not have a lot of direct control over health insurance. But we're the biggest state. We're one of the biggest economies in the world. We're one of the biggest buyers of insurance in the whole world. We should be jumping in and leading, right? We are a state of innovation, of dreamers, of creativity. That's what I love about this place. We should be leading in health insurance. We should get the whole country to fix the health insurance mess that we have. And that's what I would do.
I agree, and I like that you're straightforward and you say health insurance is going to be a tough one, um, because a lot of people might get their hopes up and go, Merritt's going to do everything, but the fact that you're saying even though we don't have a lot of control there, you still want to fight. You still want to fight for us there, which I appreciate. Somebody that's dealing with medical bills at the moment, but everywhere else too. I mean, when we talk about home insurance, I purchased my house in 2020, and I live near an area where we had a fire. I can't remember the name of the fire here, about 20 miles away. And because I am in the same zip code, I couldn't get insured when I was buying my house. So I had AAA before, and they called me and said, "Hey, we're really sorry, we can't underwrite your policy." And I was like, "I'm supposed to sign tomorrow. Like, what am I supposed to do?" She's, "We're sorry. It's there's nothing we can do. Um, it's the national at the national level. They're just saying they can't do it." And people don't understand. What they don't understand outside of California is that the fire is so far away from you that it's very and because you're in the city and that's up in the national forest, it's not going to affect you. We're not concerned about it, but in their office back on the East Coast, they're concerned about it, so they won't do
Gio,
anything.
how long ago was that that
It
that,
was
that
in
happened?
2020, and
2020, yeah.
unfortunately, I can't remember the name of the fire. It was
Yeah,
devastating here locally,
sure.
and
Well, and the reality is it's gotten even worse because what the Palisades fire did, actually, my house, which burned down,
yeah,
was not in a fire zone. We hadn't been, tagged as a fire risk. But as you know, there was no water in the fire hydrants, right? And so the
and that's
entire community burned down. So the insurance company is saying, whoa, we actually did our modeling, in your case, not very well to
yeah.
model risk for wildfires, but we didn't anticipate that the cities in California would literally have no water in the fire hydrants and houses would just burn without a fireman or woman anywhere around. That's what happened in my neighborhood. All the ring cameras confirm it. Not a single fire truck as all those houses burned.
Yeah, for everybody that watched the promo for today's show, I was watching clips all weekend, and I just a flood of memories coming back because I was watching the news, and it wasn't like you, Merritt, because I didn't live there, so it wasn't personal to me. But I was watching, and my even rewatching it, my heart was breaking. Like, oh my god, this is just devastating. And there was clips where the news anchors and probably because they also live in Los Angeles and they're watching these neighborhoods burn. They could barely talk.
Yeah.
They were just like, where where are the firefighters?
Yeah.
Where's how come there's no water in the fire hydrants?
Yeah. Yeah. You
Why aren't
saw
they
the,
pulling water from the reservoirs?
yeah,
And
because the reservoirs were empty.
firefighters were cut. Uh, Fire
Yeah.
hydrants were empty. Reservoirs were empty. Just
Yeah.
a full list of failures. And then I just happened to come across the clip of Mayor Bass, and when she was quiet, and the reporter was just asking her like just questions like, "Hey, they said that you shouldn't have cut the firefighters' budget back. What do you have to say about that?" And she's just sitting there quiet. They said
Yeah.
that they're asking questions about the reservoir. What do you have to say about that? Fire hydrants have no water. What do you have to say about that? And she's just quiet. And
Yeah.
what people that watch the promo don't understand, I had to cut that because it's a really long clip. I had to cut a lot of the silence out because I had to fit all of that into 3 minutes. Otherwise, Instagram won't hit the algorithm. It'll only go to my followers. I wanted
Right.
more people to see it, and just clip after clip of devastation, and all I can think was, and Merritt had to live through this. Like
Yeah.
we
Well,
lived through it, but
absolutely.
he
And
actually,
look, it's not just me. I mean, quite frankly,
the whole community.
by nature more motivated to try and help my community. And by the way, I should also point out, I really have also done this, and I'm running to demonstrate to my two sons that the way you get through a tragedy is you work to make things better for other people, right? You get your attention off yourself
Yeah,
and you try to do things for others. And that's what really can get you on through. And so, yeah, what I'm trying to do here and will do if successful, if I can, get through here, which I believe I can, is actually really make things meaningfully better. And so I would do something. First of all, we'll work on the insurance piece, absolutely. But on top of that, I'll do something which the insurance commissioner hasn't done, and which, quite frankly, no one has done. And the legislature in California, the politicians haven't done, which is come up with rules to make our communities safer so that what
yeah,
you just described can't happen again. Right. So there were Oakland fires in the 80s, and those happened with kind of an unusual windstorm in the Oakland Hills. And a big part of the contributor to the fires was that Oakland had inconsistent attachments for fire hoses, if you can believe it. So fire trucks
yeah,
pulled up to fire hydrants and weren't able to connect. And the time that was, that meant for the fire trucks to, I don't know, move to elsewhere to find a fire hydrant allowed the fire to explode. And so that was known a long time ago. And yet the state hasn't come up with minimal standards for safety for cities to abide by, right? So I would come up with those as insurance commissioner, even though it's not considered part of the current job, right? That's
yeah.
that's what Amazon does. That's what Disney did in the places I was in. You just jump in. And I'll tell you one other thing too. So two other things related to what you just talked about. What we have not seen, which is almost to me as disturbing, well, not as bad, of course, as the fires or the insurance mess, but right up there, is the fact that we haven't had an honest inquiry, right? Any good government after this kind of a disaster will have an honest, impartial inquiry into everything that went wrong and everybody who was responsible for. The fact that we haven't had was really what pushed me over the edge and led me to jump in and run for this office. It's shocking. I mean,
Can can
do you not
you
agree?
can you explain I think I know what you're talking about, but for the listeners that don't understand, can you explain that? What
Sure.
is an
So look,
inquiry?
yeah, look, I've got friends who live in the United Kingdom, and they said to me after the fires, well, I'm sure that there will be a big investigation, by somebody who is not biased, who is impartial, who will look at everything that led up to that disaster and identify what went wrong and who caused it to go wrong, right?
Right.
And I had to say to them, no, like we're not seeing that. It's really shocking, and it's not okay, right? The Democrats who have control of the state, who have had control for a long, long time, right? They're not by any matter of means all bad people, but the reality is they've had control. They have not allowed any inquiry like that to go forward. The
Wow.
information we have has been pulled out as a result of lawsuits filed against the city. And that's not okay. We have a democracy and we have got to have transparency into what goes right and what goes wrong.
I agree. And I- because I feel like I'm a little more in tune than most folks. I find it interesting, almost shameful that we are a year and a half out from when that fire occurred. It was January of last year.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
over 14, 15 months, and we are now getting leaked tape of phone calls. I mean, I would have thought that something like you said, an inquiry would have happened, and these things would have been looked into. And now
Yeah.
that they're
The-
now
yeah.
that they trickle out, it almost makes
Yeah.
me feel like I don't know if that's is it even trustworthy the way that it's coming out. I mean, who's putting
Well,
that out? Why didn't it come out
it's coming
before?
out now because of lawsuits that were filed against the city. That's the only
Okay,
reason that that stuff is coming out, and that's not okay, right? And by the way, California should be leading in governance. We should be leading and demonstrating the best forms of democracy for our nation and for the entire world. Not doing things that really, quite frankly, should be regarded as a cover up. I mean, I don't like that term, but that's really what it feels like. They've hidden this information instead of putting it out there. And let me just, point out one other thing too, right? I mean, there's so many wrongs, including the fact that, and here's a fairly simple thing that could have been changed but wasn't, which just goes to the incompetence of the city, the county, the firemen and women who had looked and dealt with a fire that preceded this fire knew it wasn't out, right? You've seen information coming out about that. They knew that still had active hotspots, even as big windstorm was coming. I don't know if you got the warnings on your cell phone. Most of LA getting warnings that there was a big windstorm coming, which created high fire risk. They knew that there were hotspots. The firemen and women knew that, but they had no way of raising that up the chain apparently. So when I was the lead lawyer for Disneyland, right? And
right.
if anything happened at Disneyland that involved a guest injury of any sort, a risk of injury, I would get an immediate notice. And I would let the president of Disneyland know. I'd let the president of the Walt Disney Company know. We would all track that problem until it was taken care of, right? And at
Right.
Amazon has a rule where if there's anything major that's going wrong with respect to delivery and things like that, it goes straight up to the top and somebody can like pull a plug and make sure that that gets taken care of right away. And the head of Amazon actually said he modeled, well, this is the head of retail at the time I was there. I was at Amazon for 11 years. And he explained to the group that they had modeled their program on what Toyota did. Toyota has a rule on the factory floor that if there's a flaw that's coming out, as the cars go down the factory floor, that anybody can pull a cord they call the andon cord and shut the factory floor down. That's what we needed in this circumstance. Can you imagine if there'd been that? This whole thing would have been avoided.
And I mean, it could have been called early. I mean,
Yeah.
all the way back to unfortunately we found out after the fact with the current California Insurance Commissioner Ricardo Lara. The insurance companies, even the insurance companies, were complaining about things leading up to the fires in the Palisades. Um, uh, the forest management, um, uh, just I mean, there's a list, and unfortunately, you guys, a lot of residents found out after the fact that Ricardo Lara allowed the insurance companies to pull out. So now you have residents that were affected and they didn't know they weren't uninsured.
Yeah, the mistakes made with respect to insurance are extraordinarily and really, really they're tragic for the people who have suffered under them, right? We've known for many, many years after almost all the big California fires that underinsurance is a big problem, right? Insurance companies will write policy, they either don't update it or perhaps homeowner will say, "Gosh, that's a really expensive policy," and and then the insurance, agent will say, "Okay, we'll just, give you a different amount, but you'll be fine." Well, they're not going to be fine.
Right.
So, and by the way, and this is typical too, and I think it's good for all those who are tuned in to understand how we got here. So we have laws being made by politicians who, in many cases, A, aren't business people. So they're not thinking through them very carefully or thoughtfully, and B, are under huge influence by various interests, including insurance companies. So insurance companies aren't by all means all bad, and everything they do isn't bad at all. But what they will tend to do, if there's a law that's intended to protect the consumer, they will lobby to have it adjusted in a way that makes it ineffective. Right.
Right.
So, and that's a good example of one. So, there was a law that on paper would protect consumers from being underinsured. It put an obligation on the insurers, but the insurance companies got the language of the law watered down enough. And then they took it to court, and the court basically made it totally ineffective. So I would change that, and this is what I would do. I would get committees of builders together, zip code by zip code, and say, here's different types of homes, and this is what it's going to cost to rebuild this kind of home in the event of a disaster. And we're going to make sure the insurance company says, this is what the Department of Insurance says you should have for insurance coverage. And if you don't, you're going to check the box and sign off here. So we're sure right? There's so much more. And this all comes from what Amazon does. They inform customers. We've got to make it super easy for people to understand what they're getting and what they're not getting, to make it really clear for them as consumers and understand what motivates them, what's going to speak to them. Because if you have laws being written that aren't sensitive to the way consumers really act, they're not going to do what they're intended to do, right?
I agree. It makes me curious. Who's responsible when somebody drops the ball like that?
Well, so look, the certainly the legislatures themselves, those who are legislating are responsible. And then in the case of the insurance commissioner, there is a lot of discretion in the regulations and a lot of room for somebody who really knows what they're doing and knows how to act, knows that you can be aggressive, you should be aggressive, you can take action, even if it's not clear that you're supposed to, right?
Yeah.
Ricardo Laura has, as you know, it's Ricardo Laura, the incumbent, not a lawyer, no senior legal experience, no senior business experience running a big organization. And he doesn't have built into him a sense of how he should jump in and act. And that's what has to change. But look, one of my competitors, two of my competitors actually, were long term politicians in Sacramento. They were state senators who were termed out. So they're looking for a new gig. Well, they both have had opportunities over the years to change insurance regulation to get us out of the crisis. And I asked one of them, and this led me to jump in too. It was a motivating factor. I said to him, his name is Senator Ben Allen. And I said, Ben, why has the insurance crisis been allowed to get this bad in California? Not just in home, auto, and everything else. And he was honest. I give him credit for that. He said, Merritt, insurance is a really hard thing to fix. And politicians don't like to touch things that are hard to fix. So nobody really wants to get involved. And so I'm like, okay, so do the math here. The bigger the problem, what you're telling me is the bigger the problem, the more urgent it is that the problem get fixed for California citizens, the less likely politicians who are elected are going to want to deal with it. That is bad news, right? I
I
mean,
agree.
that's bad. That's a bad state of affairs.
Yeah, that that's a serious. It makes me very concerned when you say something like that. That there's politicians out there that admit that if something's difficult, we don't want to touch it. It
Right.
scares
And
it
so the
scares me on two
biggest
levels.
problems, which should be what everybody's focusing on, are in
Yeah,
fact the ones people are running away from.
yeah. It's
That
hard.
is
Work
so
together.
not okay.
I, I
And it's I'm laughing, but it is just so not okay, right? It's true here, it's true in other areas too. It's shocking.
I agree. And so you have a plan, and I'm sure you're looking at things at all levels because you're coming at it with a business aspect. I had mentioned this the other day. I can't remember who I was talking to, but I told him I feel like when it comes to politicians, a lot of these guys don't have real experience doing real jobs. It almost seems like they get into politics in their 20s, and in their 20 I feel like when I was in my 20s, everything that I did was for myself. I didn't start to do things in the interest of others at that point because I wanted to move up the ranks. And now that I'm at a certain level, I'm like, you know what? I feel like I get more done. I get more recognition when I actually think about doing things for others because now the team likes me, right? And when I feel like for politicians, if they were to do things for others instead of for themselves, maybe lobbyists are involved, maybe other factors. But when you do things for the people, they go, I really like that person. I want to vote for him again because he got a lot of things done for me, or he got that really difficult thing done that nobody wanted to touch. And you're you're saying, hey, this is what Merritt's done like in every position that he's taken on. So now I want to bring this to the state because you guys hurt me, and instead of me being upset about it, and um, I mean, as a lawyer, I'm sure you can go up the chain, but instead of doing that, you're like, no, 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 I want to make a difference. So as a fighter, where do you plan on starting?
So yeah, and I've always been very direct, and I like to be that way. Quite frankly, losing my home in the fires has made me even more direct. I don't really have time to play around with facts or anything else, right? So I'll be
Yeah,
very clear about what I think, what I can really jump in and do, and the things that I would have to push for and ask for cooperation to get, right? From people who, quite frankly, may not want to cooperate. Some politicians who haven't fixed things to date. So the good news about this position is that it does have a lot of discretion around a lot of really important things, including especially rate making and the rate making process and how it jumps straight in to help direct insurance companies about where they should go. So I would jump straight in. I would go, first of all, I would do what we would do at Amazon if we had a big problem, or at Disney too, and I would get the right expert groups together and I would go insurance type by insurance type. And we would look for what is driving up the costs in each place. So it's going to be different for different kinds of insurance, right? For auto insurance, it may be that we've got a problem with liability, being too high. We feel very badly for anybody who gets injured, but there's a point at which, huge payouts, we all pay for those. So maybe we're being excessive in payouts. Maybe trial attorneys there are creating a problem. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't. But we're going to get the right experts together. We're going to look at what is driving up those costs because we've got to get costs down across the board for everybody. And we would do that with the right experts for each type of insurance. For home insurance specifically, we would do that. I would strip away the regulations that have been blocking companies from innovating, right? So Amazon is all about innovation. California is about innovation. We need to spark a big innovation revolution around technology, excuse me, in insurance. We need to do what we've done in finance. So, Apple Pay didn't come out of nowhere. Apple Pay had to get supported with regulatory change that permitted it. We need to change the regulations in insurance so that we can have a similar consumer friendly revolution around insurance so that you can super easily shop for insurance, compare insurance, and so that the insurance company can't cancel you. Right? There's no reason why they should be signing you up and then canceling you. I mean,
yeah.
certainly at a minimum, not without a very long runtime before they cancel you. So let's make that a very long runtime. Let's let you cancel. If you can find a better insurance company with lower rates on them, you should be able to switch right away. They should not be able to cancel on you. And then I would go in and do what I said. And I would say, okay, these are, I would use executive action. What is executive action? Executive action is just me and my team jumping in and helping people out, helping people understand how much insurance they should get, coming up with new rules for how your insurance agreements are written. So one of my competitors had said, oh, well, we should get AI to help people understand their complicated insurance agreements. And I'm a lawyer, and I've been at Amazon where we simplify for consumers. And my response was, why don't we just make the agreements possible to understand? How about if instead of giving people AI to, understand a contract that's made to be confusing, let's require insurance companies to write their contract so you know what you're signing up for and what you're going to get. Right. And then if you lose your home, let's make sure that they pay you out within 30 days for whatever you signed up for. None of this nonsense about you lost your home, you lost all your possessions in your home, and you're going to have to itemize every single possession that you lost. Absurd. And quite frankly, cruel to do to families. That needs to change. That should change now. Then I'll just add one other thing because you've touched on it with your inability to get coverage, right? So many people might have heard about Fair Plan. That is this plan of last resort that people get thrown onto if they can't get insurance.
I wanted to ask
And
about that.
yeah, and Fair Plan is a disaster, right? It is terrible for people who get stuck on it. It has high deductibles, high cost. It pays poorly if you have a problem. It's bad for consumers. It's also bad for the insurance companies because the insurance companies like AAA and others are obligated to run Fair Plan, and they're on the hook if Fair Plan is short of money. If a big fire happens and Fair Plan doesn't have enough money, they have to put money into Fair Plan. So Fair Plan itself, perversely, is actually keeping insurance companies from writing more policies in the state because they're on hook for capital calls, meaning they can be obligated to put more money in depending upon the percentage of homes they've insured in the state. So if AAA gets up tomorrow morning and some analyst looks and says, wait a minute, we've got a huge potential call for money from Fair Plan, the way they can reduce that risk to their bottom line is they can start canceling people. Right. So Fair Plan is ridiculous. We have got to get rid of Fair Plan and urgently. So I've got a plan which is called Cow Reinsure, modeled on what Florida did to get out of a insurance crisis caused by hurricanes, what the United Kingdom, which is a big center for insurance the world over. You might have heard of Lloyd's of London, right? They're based in the UK. Basically, they get money from the world over, Middle East money and things like that.
Yeah.
People who are willing to invest in insurance, and then they redirect it to insurance funds, including here in California. So we would create a reinsurance authority. The state would organize it. It would sit behind every insurance policy, and it would cover this one risk, right? Community fire risk. And so your insurance company, AAA, wouldn't have to say, no, I'm not going to write your policy, Geo. They could write it without having to worry about that risk. Then they would include in your policy an amount of money for that risk, and they would pass it to the authority. And that would then allow for statewide coverage so that if there was a fire that happened in Shasta or San Diego or Palm Springs, it would all get covered by everybody putting in money statewide, which is what you want with insurance. That would eliminate the need for Fair Plan. It would let everybody get the coverage they want, and it would let small new companies come into the state and write policies because they wouldn't have to worry about that one risk, which is really, really small for any of us, but obviously if it happens, creates a huge financial, risk.
That's actually a good idea. Because you consider these let's just say ABC Insurance because I
Sure.
don't want to get in trouble with any insurance companies. But if ABC Insurance is insuring an area that is high risk for fires, they want to charge a lot because when it happens, they want to make sure that they've made money from it and not lost money. But if you do that at a statewide, then you can decrease the cost across the whole state. And when there are fires, there's actually funds to get to rebuild or restore that area, and people aren't suffering like right now.
That's
It's
absolutely right. So look, I mean, it is such a, this is one of, if you think about it, it's one of the few products that we buy that really affects other people. When
right.
we've seen that in the Palisades and in Altadena. If my neighbors aren't rebuilding because their insurance coverage was no good, I'm not going to rebuild either. So that eliminates that. It also makes it easier for insurance companies to write policies because right now they have to worry about, they don't want to write too many policies in the same neighborhood, even in the same zip code, because if a fire happens there, right, they're going to, if they've written a whole lot of policies, they're going to be in trouble. But with this, because that risk is spread statewide, it doesn't matter how many. If they want to come in and rewrite all of Altadena, it doesn't raise their risk. Does that make sense?
It makes complete sense. I actually
Yeah.
really like that idea. I,
Yeah.
I, how long has Florida had that? And why hasn't anybody, Ricardo Lara? Why didn't you think of
Yeah,
that?
well, Ricardo Lara isn't likely to see it. Ben Allen has now said, well, that's actually kind of a good idea. There was an article in Cal Matters this week, which is a publication you may know out of Sacramento, which talked about it. I put forward the proposal some months ago, and there was a good article about it written in Insurance Management Magazine. Um, it's interesting. There's a version of that which is being proposed by one of my opponents, Jane Kim, who is on the far left. Now, her plan says we should just be privatizing and making insurance a public, job no matter what. So I don't agree with that. It goes way too far. But she and I do agree that this is a big problem, and big problems need big thinking. Right. One of Amazon's core tenants that everybody in the ranks knows is absolutely essential is think big. And if you've got a big problem, you don't just try and band-aid it, do little things around it. It's not going to work. You've got to innovate, you've got to think big, and you've got to go big to get us out of this. That's what we need.
I really like that, Merritt. That's actually genius. I love that. You're
I
not.
should add one more, one more thing too, which is also compelling. So after 9/11, which is relevant to Cal Reinsurance, after 9/11, the market for terrorism insurance froze up. Now you might think terrorism insurance, like what's that? Who needs it? But the thing about terrorism insurance is it was part of business policies, part of building policies, like if you have a commercial building.
Right.
And so the fact that insurers were not willing to write terrorism insurance was causing a big economic impact, just like we're having today for your home and for other homes. So what the government did is they did something similar to Cal Reinsure, right? They created a reinsurance authority and they said, you know what? A terrorism act is going to push the liability, the risk, the cost to us, to the reinsurance authority. And they collected amounts of money from every terrorism and insurance policy being written. And they did the other piece, which we need to do too, right? It's a twofer. You put in the reinsurance authority and you reduce the risk, right? Which is what we talked about earlier. And in that case, if you remember, the government then said, okay, we're going to put locks on the pilot doors so somebody can't just open the pilot door and take over the airplane, right?
Yeah.
And we're going to put in tougher security in the airports so that somebody can't just get on a plane in Boston and take out the World Trade Centers. So that's the precedent, that's the model we need to build on. The federal government did it. We need to do it here in California for wildfire.
It's brilliant because a lot of these companies that have left, they do it out of fear that they're not going to survive here long term. And some of these companies they leave before they start to lose money. And if ABC insurance company is insuring an area that suddenly has a disaster, and they have to pay everybody out and they go out of business, and meanwhile everybody else sits around, Geico, farmers, and they're all like, well, good thing we didn't insure there, and they're making record profits. And now they're saying, yeah, we're absolutely not going to go into that area because we just saw what happened with ABC insurance company. Now you've taken that liability away, and it's such a great idea. I'd be interested to see what else you bring to the table. The more time you would be in that position, because it's an amazing start.
Well, thanks. And listen, I mean, really, I suppose the larger point is, and you would have it in your career, right? When you have enough experience in something, you see solutions, you see opportunities, you see ways to address problems that other people just aren't going to see because they haven't had the experience. You have like a whole. eh, I've got in my tool. I've got a huge toolkit,
Yeah.
of tools. Some are going to be legal, some of them are going to be business, right? And even one of those here, which is relevant to this, particular proposal, is that when you have a big, complicated problem, it's like technology, right? If you're some of your our viewers here are in technology, you don't try and fix it all. You find the bug. You pull away the problem to where the specific problem is. You separate it out. You move it to the side so that the rest of it can move forward, right? This takes this one risk, which hopefully no one else who's viewing this, no one else participating other than me will ever actually have to suffer from, which is the loss of a home. But it's mucking up the whole system. So pick it up, move it aside over there, deal with it separately.
I agree. I agree. Sorry, I'm laughing. I work in the I've worked in the software industry, and um, I'm completely following you there. So, um, bring experience that a lot of other candidates don't necessarily have, and that starts with your time at Disney, your impressive time at Disney. Um, what did you do at Disney?
So at Disney, yeah, it's interesting. At both companies, actually, I will say Disney and Amazon, I entered at the beginning of a huge growth period. So I was at Disney during a age which for many viewers will seem fairly distant now. It's actually referred to by many as the Disney Renaissance. It was the period after the end, after Walt Disney died. He was incredibly creative. He'd created this great company. The company fell into the hands of his son-in-law, who was not talented at all. And you might know there was a period where there were basically no movies coming out, nothing was
Yeah.
happening, right? And so there were investors who were looking, they were circling the company to buy it and break it up, sell off the studio, sell off the animated features. And a wealthy investor group from Texas had the bright idea to say, why don't we just, it's actually a great asset. Let's reinvigorate it. And so they went to this guy, Frank Wells, who was a Stanford lawyer and had run Warner Brothers and tried to climb the seven summits. He didn't make it up to the top of Everest, but he was available after having done his seven summits effort. And the investors went to him, and he's super smart guy. He knew how to get things done, but he's not a creative guy. And he knew that he's not a creative guy. And he said, we need this guy named Michael Eisner, who's a younger guy at Paramount. And Michael's going to know how he's going to have the right creative touch. So the two of them came in. You might know this history, right? And they brought in a lot of amazingly talented executives, and that's when The Little Mermaid came out first, right? And then Beauty and the Beast, The Lion King. Each of those things generated, $1 billion literally in consumer product sales. It allowed the parks to get filled again. And those two, Michael Eisner and Frank Wells, they started opening up new theme parks left, right, and center. So anyway, I started out in corporate legal. Little Mermaid was still being hand painted in the same building I was in when I
Oh,
started.
you
Just
started before a Little Mermaid came out.
yeah, I started before it came out. It was the last movie to be fully hand painted, and it was painted in the Ink and Paint building, and I had an office in the Ink and Paint building, which was super cool.
That's
So
crazy.
yeah, yeah. So
So you were there
then
from before the whole Renaissance started, because
yeah,
the Little Mermaid started the Renaissance, right?
yeah, it really did. It really did. And it was a brilliant, the team who created that, the lyricist Howard Ashman and Alan Menken, and the music composer, unbelievably creative individuals. So those came out. I then was tapped to start working on special projects for the theme parks, and I was in the theatrical film division. I moved out of corporate. That was super interesting, and because the two heads of the company were very active in the deals for the theme parks, I got involved in working with them a lot, which was awesome. And then I was asked, because I got a reputation for being good at recreating things and building new things up, I was asked to be the head of business and legal affairs for Disney Interactive, which was a games group when it started, and
Wow, I
Disney
remember that.
Online. And then I was asked to go be the head lawyer for the Disneyland Resort because it was expanding, adding the California Adventure, adding new hotels, and there was a dynamic team there. So I went down there and I headed security as well as legal and guest claims. And it was a fantastic time.
I that's really impressive. And you're running down the list, and I'm just like, all these memories are unlocked. Disney Interact. I was like, oh man, I remember that. um, and so what I because you started before The Little Mermaid came out. You might have, before you took the job there, you might have realized the reputation that Disney was kind of fading away, right? I mean, obviously you went in when Bob Eisner was already there, but he hadn't proven himself yet. It's not like walking into the place in 1998. I mean,
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's interesting, actually. I kind of marvel. Well, look, I mean, also this was pre-internet, so you couldn't like Google everything. It was was harder to get information. I'd always loved the company. I was actually a huge theme park fan when I was young. I was one of these ones who went in as a young child, and I had, I don't know, $50, which actually is real money when I think about it. And I wanted to buy Disney stock. And I remember the stockbroker at the time talked me out of it. My mother and I went in. He's like, no, 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 that company's dead. You don't want to put your money there. So I didn't. But yeah, I went in. But when I went in, I'll tell you part of what impressed me. The team impressed me. I did love the company. And the president of the company, Frank Wells, interviewed me personally before I joined. Right, he was interviewing all the lawyers. The general counsel, the lead lawyer, complained. He said, "Oh, Frank thinks he's the lead lawyer." So yeah, Frank was this super impressive guy. He was involved in the community. He was an ardent environmentalist, which I appreciated too. And so yeah, it was an opportunity. But you're right, I didn't fully appreciate it. Similarly at Amazon. I mean, when I joined Amazon, it had 20,000 employees, which seemed mature. It has over 2 million or something now. It's an
yeah,
insane number of employees. And in both cases, I knew I was joining teams with hardworking, creative people. I could see that, and smart people. But I didn't have a sense really about how much further they could go. Um,
I spent more time looking into your work at Amazon than Disney. So I, I'm a little shocked and really impressed about the time that you started at Disney and what you got to see there. But when I was researching Amazon, I also noticed that I mean, Amazon was already big when you started, right, on the storefront,
yeah.
but you took part in something huge that Amazon did, right, with Amazon Prime Video, Amazon Prime Music, Kindle. I mean, when you think about Amazon, those are the things that we think about now. It's all of the media side, all of the digital, and you had a good part of that.
Yeah, I was the first thing I had to do was when I was hired in was to get the digital video deals done, which was actually in the scheme of things an easy job for me because I'd been at the studios. I'd actually been at Sony Pictures before then too, between Disney and Amazon, and so I knew how the executives in those companies thought. Um, but yeah, it was fantastic. So it was digital video, then launching digital music, and each time, and this is really relevant to what will bring to the Department of Insurance. We looked at what had to be done for the customer. We didn't look at what was convenient for us as a company. We certainly didn't look at what was convenient for the studios and the record labels, or at least convenient as they saw it. So with digital video, for instance, the big breakthrough that we insisted on was ability to re-download so that if you buy the film, you might remember, like before then, there was some efforts around selling or renting videos online. Sony Pictures
Yeah.
had one, and because this and the studios insisted that you would download it once, which was hard to do at the time, and then it would be on you to like store it and move it. And at Amazon, we're like, no, that is so. not consumer friendly. That is not what people want. That's not what they need. If they buy it, we're going to give it to them in any format they want, as long as they want. And and the lawyers in the studios are like, "Whoa, I'm not sure we can do that." But we started with Warner Brothers. Warner Brothers had a very dynamic digital lead, and the lawyer, fortunately, was a woman who I knew well, very smart. I had actually known her in college, and she's like, "Okay, Merritt, what do we need to do?" And we got that deal done in 3 days, right? And then that set the precedent for the rest. Disney didn't sign until a year later. They lost a bunch of money. They didn't get anything. Warner Brothers didn't. But they were just, that was Disney in the post Michael Eisner, Frank Wells, Merritt Farren era. What can I say? So, but then, yeah, we went on and launched digital music without DRM. That was the big thing. I don't know if you remember, music tracks all had DRM, meaning you couldn't move it around, right? And yet
Yeah,
there was a huge, what was a huge market for? Illegal tracks, right?
I do remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, so we're like, listen, you guys need to let us sell it without DRM. So we broke through that. Kindle, and I'll tell you again, not to, I think you can't underestimate the importance of real experience. So in the middle of Kindle, this was a big Jeff Bezos project, of course. It involved the ebooks, involved the physical devices, with that team being led by executives from Apple, brought in down in Cupertino, where Apple is. Amazon went for the best people for the best roles,
Yeah.
whatever they needed to do. And there was a big patent dispute because Samsung was suing, going after Qualcomm. Our chips in the first Kindle were from Qualcomm. And Samsung was suing them for patent infringement, and there was a chance that we wouldn't be able to get our chips in the country, and the Kindle launch wouldn't happen. So I was literally on a plane down to San Diego to meet with executives and lawyers at Qualcomm to figure out the problem and how we would work around it, because the patent had to do with the way the chip integrated. You're from technology, you would understand this, right? It had to do not just with the chip generally, but the way the chip interacted with the rest of the system. And so, that kind of experience and urgency, right? We were not going to delay that launch. That was not going to be possible.
No,
So we were all
that would have
over it.
been massive.
Yeah.
Honestly,
Yeah.
everything that you've gone through right now. I mean, starting with the with the movies online, the downloads. Um, as you started talking about it, I started remembering, um, because I was an early adapter of digital movies. My brother would be like, "No, no, no, you need the hard copy. Like that's dumb. Just throw a little stupid paper away." And I was like, "No, this is gonna be important one day." And he's like, "No, it's so stupid. Everybody has their own websites. You have to have an account everywhere." And I was like, "No, there's gonna be a day where it's all gonna be in one place." And he was like, you're crazy." And I remember when it started to come together. I can't remember the name of the website. It wasn't movies anywhere. It was started with a blue, didn't it? Didn't it have
You
blue
mean on
or
Amazon
violet?
itself? Well, we started with the name Unbox, so that was not a great name, but it just became Amazon, movies, right? And
But yeah,
and, and then
I do
Amazon
remember when
Prime.
Amazon did it
Yeah,
because
yeah.
when I finally got on Amazon, I saw all my movies there, and I was like, I don't remember putting my movies in here. And my wife was like, I didn't do that. I was just like, I looked
Well,
into it, and I heard that all the studios had started to agree to allow this to happen.
yeah,
But
that was another piece that we also insisted on because it was customer friendly, right? And
yeah,
yeah, those things all took negotiation and persuasion and finding the people who would be forward thinking. And so part of the message, part of the learning there, which is really relevant here, super relevant to fixing our insurance mess, is some insurance companies are going to be forward thinking. I've already spoken extensively with one called Acrisure, and they are writing a few policies in the state of California. They write policies elsewhere. They would come into the state. They're forward thinking. They've got some executives who are creative. We need to clean up the regulations so that they can come in. We need to attract the forward thinking ones. Just like at the time with video, at the first most forward-thinking one at the time was Warner Brothers. Other studios, not so much. They were slower to come to the table. We need to do that with insurance companies and then bring them in and bring in the ones who want to work in a way that's going to be consumer friendly, and then the other ones will follow. And if they really don't want to follow, then let them leave the state, right? But we don't want them to leave the state before we have other companies in because we need the insurance to come from the companies.
I agree. I love that you bring that experience in, and for the folks that are watching or that will see this later, the fact that you were able to, um, in different uh, in different types of positions, because I mean you're going from Disney, different roles at Disney. You went to Sony, and then Amazon, and yeah, it's all we consider it all media, but as somebody who like has is the type of person to like read the fine print, they're all very different. Media movies aren't the same as music. They everybody does things differently. Even though when you think, oh, Sony owns all of it, but Sony's all departmentalized. Or is that the right word?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
So it's something that a lot of people don't realize. They go, oh well, it's just Sony. That they should just be doing the same thing. No, that Sony Music does something different from Sony Pictures, and do they own Columbia Pictures? Um,
yeah, yeah.
so
They
everybody
include.
does things differently, and
Yeah,
some
yeah,
of them
the
consider
music
it a
group at
separate
Sony is
company.
completely and totally different from the film group, which is Columbia Pictures and Sony Pictures. Yeah, completely different. I won't say they barely even talk to each other, but they did. They, that company didn't necessarily work super well together, one group to the other. And when I was there, but yeah, you're right. And quite frankly, so many people stick to a lane. If they're in music, they stick in music. I love shaking it up. I'm game to take on new things, which is why I actually find all the problems in insurance we've got here. I'm like anxious to jump in and tackle them. I love that. I am actually attracted to it. And by the way, at Amazon, one of the things that I did that well, two things I suppose that were really outside media. One was the physical devices, which I'd not really done before, right? When we launched Kindle, that's a physical device.
It
So
is.
it's all that goes with that hardware manufacturing. Um, and I, jumped straight into that happily with lawyers who I brought in who had relevant experience. And I was also the lawyer that led Amazon Web Services for a bit. Are you familiar with Amazon Web Services?
Oh yeah, AWS.
Yeah, so
Absolutely. It's like
AWS,
the biggest.
many of your viewers will know it, others won't. So AWS is actually the part of Amazon that makes the most money now. It's the biggest part of Amazon, and it is all sort of business to business technology, and it comes out of Amazon's thinking, which is relevant again in various ways to the role of insurance commissioner here, right? Jeff Bezos had among his many talents, he had this idea that you would look for something called a positive surprise. This is a great way to put it. What was a positive surprise? A positive surprise was when you did something and there was something that came along that you didn't expect. And the Amazon rule was you wouldn't just ignore that because it wasn't what you're trying to do, right? You'd actually look at it and go, oh, that's interesting. It's a surprise, but it's positive. Maybe there's something here. So, AWS, you may know the story. So, Amazon Web Services, this technology platform, came out of Amazon first, putting out some tech tools to let people who had websites and made websites direct traffic to Amazon, where you would get a feedback if you were, directing the traffic and there were sales. Basically, that's where it came out of. So they've started putting some tools out, making them available free of use. Take the assets, take these tools, and a lot of developers jumped in. And the head of that group and Jeff Bezos are like, oh, that's interesting. These developers are really anxious to have new tools and a platform to build on. And so they started rolling it out. And what Amazon did was it basically made its entire back end of servers available for developers. So that instead of having to go, which you did in the day, and buy your own servers. Like websites would buy their own servers and store them somewhere. It's
Yeah.
super expensive and, right, incredibly inflexible. Amazon just said, we're going to make it like the electric company. You can as much storage as you use, that's what you pay for. So I was the lawyer for that group for a while. And completely redid their online agreement to make it clear and up to date. And yeah, I love jumping into new things. I'm not intimidated by anything.
It's funny. I didn't know that story. I didn't know. I do remember the tools and but I didn't know that that's where AWS came out of. Um,
Yeah, it
that
was literally a surprise. Like it was like, okay, let's pay attention to that. Let's put some more gas in the tank here and see where it goes. And I will admit, having come a little bit still from a Disney mindset, I was sort of like, well, why are we just giving all this away for free? Is that really a good idea? But it was, yeah, it was ultimately brilliant.
yeah.
And the other piece, along with the storage, was computing power. So computing power is something, and actually, so like some of the people who jumped in right away to use it were special effects houses, because special effects houses at the time, you don't need a lot of computing power all the time, but if you're going to actually master things, you may need a whole lot. So you need to go up and down with how much you're using. And so Amazon made that available too in the same way, because you pay for what you use, and otherwise you don't pay. Brilliant.
Wow. And you were there for that. Um, I didn't know that you were there for all that, Merritt. I really
Yeah,
didn't.
no, it was.
And
Yeah.
don't. I mean,
And Andy Jassy, by the way, this very smart guy who led that group at the time, Amazon Web Services, he's now the CEO of Amazon. And that was a good decision. He's a very smart guy.
I gotta say, if it, just with your track record, and I want to say blessed, but for some of our listeners, the luck that you've had in your career, um, I I would love to look back in 10 years and be like, hey, that same success he ran into at Disney, and then at Sony, and then at Amazon, now California. Man, look how good, look how smart we were when we brought in Merritt, because this guy is, uh, he always comes in when the things get turned around, and I'm really hoping that California gets turned around, especially on the insurance side, but all over.
Yeah, yeah.
California,
Thanks, Drew. Listen, that's where you come in, which kind of goes back to your talking about this earlier. So yeah, we have to figure out how we get people tuned in and how we make it easy for them to understand, who to support, because the world is so complicated and so many people who are looking for office are not interested in being direct. They just want to say whatever they have to say to get the attention, get the vote. So that's where you guys come in, and I applaud you for doing what you're doing. It is so incredibly important. We've got to educate people better, and make it simple for them, and certainly have them realize that background and expertise, that's and not the BS around politics
yeah.
and partisan, play. That's where we need to go. Like most all the big problems in the state have nothing to do, quite frankly, with real left or right and what people argue over. They're straight down the middle. We just need straight down the middle, smart business oriented thinking.
Yeah, very important that you mentioned that, because now it leads me to think about some of the other candidates where people will go, "Oh yeah, so and so's been an insurance broker for X amount of years," and I'm sitting there thinking like, "Do y- do you know what an insurance broker does? They just I'm not I don't want to make it seem like it's not important, but I want somebody who's got a little more experience handling um how do I say, what's the right word, the legal side of it. Um
Well, I mean, handling all these tough legal tasks. Yeah, the individual you're talking about doesn't even have a law degree, much less experience there. And by the way, on the business side, with all due respect to her and to the other folks,
yeah,
look, she's never been in the room where these decisions are made. So she's not been in the room where they make policy. She's just sold insurance policies to people. She's sold
yeah,
what the company is obligated to give. And by the way, she was a captive agent, which means that to farmers, which means that if you went into her office and AAA had better insurance at a better rate, she wouldn't have sold that to you. She would have sold you what farmers had, because she was attached to farmers.
Oh,
So
okay.
look, I mean, I said somewhat facetiously, my first job, which I was very proud of in high school, it was called a box boy at the time. I was a bagger in a supermarket, right? And then I became promoted to checker. I was a checker for a while. I came back from college and I worked the swing shift. Not easy. Started at 6 p.m., ended at 3 a.m. every night, and I'd restock the milk, go in the cold room and restock the milk. Then I'd
Merritt, you don't have to go much further. You have my endorsement to run the whole grocery store.
Well, okay, but here's my point.
I feel like
So
that's what you're getting
yeah,
at.
well,
It's like, yeah,
thank
the
you.
bag
So
checker is gonna run the
okay,
store.
so I agree with you, but run the grocery store, not Albertsons or Vons, right? Right? I knew how to sell. Right? This is what the other candidate has. She's been a sales rep. She knows that. She doesn't, but she's not, she can't be CEO of the insurance company or CEO of the Department of Insurance. It makes no sense, right?
Right.
I was not qualified to be the CEO of Albertsons at all at that stage of my career,
Yeah,
right?
I love that you use that analogy. I'm glad I caught on pretty quick onto it because, um, yeah, when you started going that route, I was like, yeah, man, I get it. That's awesome. You're doing the back checking. You can handle some things in the store, but you're not gonna run Albertsons. No.
No, no.
Yeah. I think that with your qualifications, your experience, the knowledge that you bring to the table, the the fact that you can go into a boardroom with some of these insurance companies, maybe even some of the ones that have left. I mean, can we talk about the ones that have left? How can we bring them back?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Listen, I mean, it's very interesting, even so. As I said, when intervened under this process that the state has, that was put in place by the voters, actually, in the state farm rate proceedings, there was a hearing before the judge, whether it's to decide whether or not I'd be allowed to participate. And at one point, uh, I suggested that if State Farm wanted to have a premium product, a premium insurance policy that they sold that said that if your house was destroyed, you'd get an immediate payout, that they should be able to do that because the current rate proceedings didn't permit that. They weren't flexible enough. And very interestingly, the lawyer for State Farm, who was there objecting to my participation, raised her hand. She said, Merritt Farren, that's very interesting you say that because State Farm has been trying to do that for years and the Department of Insurance won't let us. Right. So there you have it. The Department of Insurance rules have been blocking innovation. So will the right companies come in when those rules are streamlined to let them come in? Absolutely. And here's the other thing. The other thing came up during that conversation. I forget exactly how it was. What would Amazon insurance look like? And I said, look, Amazon insurance would be about being really, really clear with the consumer. Amazon doesn't actually always tell you, they don't always bring you the best product, right? But they tell you what product you're going to get. And whatever they promise, they deliver. So we talked about that. And the lawyers for the Department of Insurance is that Merritt, you should get Amazon to write insurance in California, right? New company, they should write insurance. I'm like, no, Amazon is not going to write insurance in California today. Why not? Because the rules are a mess,
Yeah.
right? They're not. Amazon is a company that wants to make sure it's following the law. We always did, right? We didn't try to skirt the law.
Right.
At Farmers, the company that the other candidate was with, I actually know someone who was there. He was a lawyer for that. He said, Merritt, we would sit around a conference table at Farmers and come up with ways to avoid the consumer protections, to get around them. We never did that at Amazon. So what Amazon would need to come into the state would be super clear rules that are simple, that so that they would know that if they did what they were intending to do with the consumer, they would be on the right side of the law. If we clean it, even Amazon might come in. So that's how we would bring them back in.
Wow. That makes me think about some of the things in California that um, have affected the prices that we're dealing with today. the increase in prices, because I know that California blocked increases from insurance companies for an extended period of time that led to us suddenly getting a huge increase at once. We didn't get to
Right.
see that and go, "Hey, wait a minute. Why is our insurance going up every year?" Instead it was, "Oh, it's great to be in California. Every other state insurance is going up." And suddenly the deal is made in Sacramento or wherever they decided in California to allow the insurance companies to put their prices up, and suddenly we're like, "Whoa! How come it doubled and tripled in just a year?" And now we're
Right.
running around like, "Well, what do we do to bring the prices down?" And the insurance companies are like, "Well, we've been telling you guys to clean up your forest. We've been telling you guys to do this, do that, and what do we do there? Can
Well,
we
there
do that?
is,
Can we go to the
yeah.
insurance companies and say, "Hey, what if we clean up our forest? What if we handle some of this forestation? Can you lower the rates?" Are there ways that we can work with these insurance companies like that?
Well, there absolutely are. I think the reality, though, is that what we really just need to do is two-pronged. We absolutely need to do a much better job of preventing fire. We can do a better job.
Yeah.
But we have to be realistic. They're still going to happen, right?
Yeah,
But there is a
regular
lot
fires.
that we can do. At least the kind of catastrophe that happened in the Palisades should never happen again. And we should do a better job buffering other cities from, the wildfire zones. We should do a better job clearing and making fire breaks, and a much better job in ensuring we've got the right amount of firemen and women and the right equipment in place. As you know, in Los Angeles, because of underfunding of the fire department, a lot of the fire trucks were out of service. So that just can't happen. So we absolutely we can do that. But the real way to bring rates down isn't going to be really negotiate with the companies. We can do that. We can try, but we need to increase competition. And so if we simplify the rules so that new entrants can come in, they will, through competition, end up bringing their rates down. So what we had here was, you're right, we kept rates down for a while artificially, but part of what that did actually is it drove some insurance companies out of the state and kept some new insurance companies from coming in. What does that do? That reduces competition. And so part of what has driven up rates is the fact that, they were artificially low. Now they were allowed to go up. But that whole process has also made, kept more companies from coming in. It's reduced competition. And I think that's been particularly meaningful, for instance, for apartment owners, where they just don't have many options at all. And the insurance companies know that. And so they raise their rates. And by the way, in auto too. And this is a trick that they'll do, right? And this is where regulation, the right regulation, has to stay in place. We have to be consumer focused. They, have literally worked. They will do things like look and see, okay, geos, you're either a big shopper, you're not, or your girlfriend, your wife, whatever, is a big shopper. They're going to say they actually want to use their algorithms and say, okay, great, Merritt's a big shopper, so we're just going to raise his rate because he's probably not going to be price sensitive. He's not going to take the time to shop elsewhere. They're going to use data from outside what should be using it, pulling it from, not my driving record, right? Not anything about the real risk that I might pose to them having a claim as a driver. They're going to use other info about me to say, we can just, you know, basically take extra money from him by upping his rates and not upping Geo's, because Geo's a more thoughtful shopper, yeah, right?
Yeah.
So that kind of stuff, that's not okay. They're just taking advantage of consumers, and so that's a big part of the role too, right? So we have to let the insurance companies, the good ones, thrive, but not let them use the kind of tricks that are simply unfair to consumers.
I agree. And going back a little bit to your plan, um, your I can't remember what you called it. The plan you're taking from Florida,
Cal Reinsure, yeah,
right?
Cal Reinsure.
Your Cal Reinsure plan. Where does that money sit? Because you mentioned like a Lloyd's of London situation. Do we have a separate insurance company, or does California hold that money?
You mean in that plan? How would that work?
Yeah,
So we would set up, it would be a reinsurance authority. Quite frankly, it probably would be run by a private industry group. It could be run by the state potentially, but
yeah,
probably would be run by a private industry group. It would basically take all that money in. It would be responsible for determining how much each of us should be contributing into the fund, right? And it would be charged with investing that money, just like insurance companies do today. And it would also have the ability to itself get reinsurance, just like insurance companies do today. So there's a lot of, you would you would have industry experts who are great at that stuff, who would be doing their best to raise the amount of capital as much as possible so that rates amounts being pulled in can be as low as possible.
I think it's such a good idea, but um, unless it's a private company, because I agree, I like private, but if for some reason it has to be through the state, Merritt, you got to make sure that these politicians keep their grubby fingers off of our money.
Look, I totally agree. It should the structure is established by the state. It should be run by a private company with enormous the enormous ability for everybody to see exactly what's going on. It has to be completely transparent.
I agree. Yeah, because the last thing I would want is a catastrophe happens, another fire, and we look at the state and say, "Thank God we made the change that we made," and people are going to get paid out, and then the state goes, "Well, we don't know where that money went," you know, like kind of
Yeah,
like the
yeah,
high
no,
speed rail
that
money or
that
the
would not, yeah,
homeless
that would not be
crisis.
okay. And by the way, listen, I mean, the reality is, in terms of really running things, sadly, we're just not very good at having our government in the United States do that. There's a few
Yeah,
exceptions, I think. I don't know if you've ever been to Washington, the state of Washington, up in the Northwest. I think they do a good job. Their ferry system, it's actually run by the state, and it actually is cheap and it runs on time. And, hats off to them. But for the most part, we're just not good at that. It's not something we can do. So I don't like any of the ideas for, the government running health insurance or other things. We're just not good at it.
no, I agree. I agree. Great ideas, Merritt. Um, I would like to give you an opportunity to get your message out. If somebody's sitting at the poll and they want to know, they hop onto your Instagram and you got one clip to sell them. I want you to give that message to them now, and then also let them know where to find you. So when they do want to take the deep dive and find out more about Merritt Farren.
Yeah, so again, I'm Merritt Farren, running for California Insurance Commissioner. You can find me at www.merrittfarren.com. So MERRITTFAREN.com, or just Google Merritt Farren. You can probably even misspell it, and it'll pop up. So yeah, find me there. Donate if you're willing to. Even small amounts are significant and helpful. And I've had folks jumping in and donating from around the state, which is super to see. And listen, I'm not a politician. I've jumped into the race as a businessman, as a father, as a Palisades fire survivor who just wants to make the state better, a Palisades fire survivor who lived through not just the fires and saw what mismanagement can do to a community, but also saw firsthand, myself and through my community, the challenges that we've had in insurance, challenges that have been allowed to fester, have been allowed to get worse. And I've got the legal experience, the business experience to actually jump in and make a difference. That's why I'm in this race. I was urged to jump in after I met with the other candidates, the other principal candidates, with some others from the Palisades who also lost their homes and businesses. And, they said to me, Merritt, none of these folks, none of them have what should be considered the basic requirements: law degree, senior experience as a lawyer, and senior experience in the executive suite of big companies. That's what we need. You need to run. And I said, fine. So that's why I'm in the race. I love innovation. California is a fantastic state, right? You think about it. On the private sector side, we've got some of the most innovative companies in the world: Apple, Google, There's a reason why they're here. That's how we're wired. That's our DNA. But on the government side, we are so far behind. We are not innovators. We have got to bring our California spirit, our California inventiveness, our California smarts into government. That's what I want to do. It's not a partisan thing ultimately, right? It's just about good governance that we should all rally behind. I'm in it to show my kids that we can do better, to make this place better for all Californians. I want to keep awesome people in this state and not let them feel like they have to leave because they can't afford to stay here. I'm a middle class person. I want to make this state a great place for everybody who's in the middle class and the working class, everybody at all economic levels to be and thrive.
Well, Merritt, I appreciate you coming on the show today and sharing a nice plan, really, on how we can make a difference in California. Um, I really appreciate the experience that you bring to the table. I will once again remind people what I tell others when they ask, why did you vote for Merritt Farren on the video that you posted on Instagram? I tell them because Merritt Farren, when I look at all the candidates, because somebody did ask, did you just choose him because he's Republican and you didn't want to vote for a woman? I was like, no, not at all. The reason I chose Merritt Farren is because I went down the list and I looked at the experience that people brought to the table. When I looked at Merritt's experience, there was nobody close. The fact that he can go in the room and litigate for us, the fact that I felt comfortable enough that he had uh, a stake in the game, right? Because he had to deal with he's still dealing with the insurance companies down in the Pacific Palisades because his house burned down. A lot of people are excited to vote for somebody like Spencer Pratt, and I'm like, well, Merritt Farren has the same situation, and he doesn't have. I don't think that you have um, all of the exciting, like the money that Spencer Pratt has, but what Merritt Farren does have is the experience and the knowledge to be able to handle something like Insurance Commissioner of California, and you know, some of the things that you said today on the call that lead me to believe that you can handle this position a lot more because you're not just doing this because you want to get back at insurance companies. You're doing this because you want to make a difference, like you told your sons. We don't just go get revenge. We do something to make a difference. And I think that is so important. That's why I was more than willing to not only vote for you, but to let others know that I was voting for you. Because it was when I circled that bubble for everybody to see, I was like, I better be proud that I'm voting for Merritt Farren because I don't want people to hit me up in the comments and go, "Hey, that's not the right guy. He's lobbyist or he doesn't have experience. He's just a broker." No, no, no. Merritt Farren is the real deal. So
Well, thanks, Joe. And listen, I know you love this state. I do too. We've just got to, it's a bigger agenda here than just insurance, right? It's a big part of making it livable. It's a bigger agenda. And yeah, I want to work with you and others. I want to get us all together to see past the partisan sniping and just come together. I don't demonize anybody. I don't demonize insurance companies. We got to stop demonizing each other. We got to just work together. That's the true spirit of Californians.
thank you so much, David, for joining me today. I always close out with a prayer. So I'm going to close it out with a prayer. And I also want to thank all the listeners for tuning in. I was just looking at Instagram and there was a lot of questions that came up in there. Do you want me to read them to you before we tune out?
Sure. If you want to take a few more minutes, do it. And by the way, I love that you close with a prayer. And you may know I participated as I gave one of the prayers of the National Day of Prayers last week, or two, and I guess a week and a half ago now. And I just want to say, my prayer was about what we just talked about a minute ago, which is let's stop demonizing each other. Let's be honest. Let's be honest with where we are, with what we're thinking. Let's not shut other people down. Let's have honest discussions about how we move forward. That is what my Christian faith tells me is right, right? We do for others and we are honest in doing for others and for our community. So thank you for doing that. But yes, if you've got a few questions there, I can take a few more minutes if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I'm just reading through some of them. I think in the beginning, somebody thought you were a community organizer, but the more we went on, they started to realize probably that you brought a lot more to the table. Um, Medical insurance agent for 47 years, and the way I see it, medical insurance should be divided in three parts: hospital, doctors, and medicine. Maybe. Um, Here we go.
Yeah, let me just say on that. So as I said, medical is super complicated, but we have to take a fresh look, and that's what I would do because I'm not attached to any of the existing interests, right? I
Yeah,
mean, seriously, why should, what the hospital charges you be different from what they charge me? Just because your insurance company is different. Does that make any sense? And same thing with drugs. And I mean, I recently switched plans, and I there was one generic, meaning not under patent, not under protection anymore, right? The
yeah,
company making it has nothing to do with who invented it, and yet the price was incredibly high. I'm looking at like, what is that about? Is that really helpful to anybody? No, it's not. We've got to break through all of that. There are too many precedents there that have blocked smart, logical innovation. We've got to fix that for people. By the way, there are hundreds of thousands of Californians who are elderly now who don't even have a hospital within hours, within an hour, multiple hours drive, because their hospital is no longer affiliated with the, Medicare plan that they signed up for. It's just not okay.
yeah. A lot of that doesn't make sense to me, and 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 like I said, like you said earlier, you mentioned that there's probably not a lot that you can do, because that is handled federally, for the most part. But the fact that you're willing to advocate and go up there and fight for us is a big deal. I think that that's a big deal. Um, Somebody asked, they mentioned they were an insurance agent. After 30 years, why I still have to do continuation credits? I don't know what that means. I'm not sure if you know what that means. The next question was, recently Department of Insurance wants us to send emails to customers asking about their race. Why does race matter on insurance?
Yeah, no, I don't think race should be considered at all. Race should not be considered at all. And by the way, another thing that shouldn't be considered, for instance, is marital status, right? So marital status, something that insurance companies look at in looking at auto insurance rates. How about we look at people's driving records and leave it at that? And by
Yeah,
the way, while we're at it, let's actually have insurance work in the way that we would all like insurance to work for. If we have an accident, it is an accident. Unless I'm really a bad driver, I shouldn't have my rates skyrocket up. I mean, that's what
yeah,
I shouldn't be in this situation. We're all in this situation, right? We've probably all had fender benders and we've thought, oh, none of us can alert the insurance company, right? Because they're just going to jack up our rates. What is that
yeah.
about? That shouldn't be appropriate.
No, I like that you say that because it's true. Whenever I mean, um, I've been in accidents, and I don't think I've been in an accident where it was my fault, but the insurance goes up, and I'm like, "Dude, it wasn't even my fault. Like I stopped at the stoplight, in line like I was supposed to, and the guy came and rear-ended me. Like, why is it my fault? Why are my rates going up? Um, so yeah, I agree with you. It should be based on my driving history. I shouldn't have. I feel like I shouldn't have to. If I'm shopping for insurance, I shouldn't have to tell, like, just an example. Okay, I shouldn't have to tell Geico. Yeah, I've had two accidents in the last 5 years, and have to explain to them what happened. Um, that somebody rear-ended me, or somebody um you know, did an illegal lane change, I feel like I shouldn't have to explain that to them, because it I know it's on my driving record, but it's something that we do for some reason.
Yeah, and I think that's right. And that's another place that the insurance commissioner really can get involved and can
Yeah,
set the standards for what can, can't be considered. And if you really are in fault, hey, we should have a rule that says you're not going to your insurance rate go up as a result of that. They can't look at that. We also need to be, thoughtful around shorter time periods that they can look back, even if you have had a fender bender. If it's something minor, you shouldn't have your rates, good. And by the way, let's face it. I mean, again, most of us can't get to work without our cars. And if our insurance rates are going to make it so expensive that it barely makes sense to go to work, it's just not coming together.
yeah.
So we've got to shift all that.
And then shout out to somebody who's calling me out because when I was running down the list, I mentioned, I'm glad that you don't want revenge. They said they questioned me. Revenge? It's about upholding the law. I agree. It is about upholding the law. Furthermore, Merritt, you also want to make a difference. You also want to make it better. You want to improve the process. So I appreciate Merritt even more so. Because yeah, you can have somebody that is just in there upholding the law, but we're not getting any better here in California. We need something different. So um, I
Yeah,
appreciate you guys.
we need to reinvent, right? So one of the core Amazon principles is invent and simplify, right? It's invent, simplify, and another thing that is core to Amazon, which we have to start doing in California in our leadership. It's data driven. What does that mean? Data driven means you look at the facts, and if it's not working, if the data is not good, you change your approach. You don't say, like with Fair Plan, for instance, right? So there are people trying to shore up Fair Plan. No, we should look at the data and say, it doesn't matter who's been shoring it up, right? I don't care who's been supporting Fair Plan over the years and thinking it was a good idea. You just look at the data and you move on,
Yeah.
right? Right. That's, by the way, and that is really Amazon. It's a big part of why Amazon is successful too. Because at other companies, I'll tell you, a certain program or plan will attach to an executive, and he or she will tend to defend it even when it's not going well, right? At Amazon, or you might remember, we're talking about Amazon, you might remember it was a Jeff Bezos project to launch an Amazon phone. It was a massive flop.
I do remember that.
I mean, it just was. You remember that? It had like one little feature that was different from iPhones, and
Did it
and
ever come
Jeff, to
out?
his
I remember
credit,
them talking about it, but I
it
don't.
did. It came out for like a week. And I don't know what happened to all those phones that have been made that didn't get sold. But Jeff, he's like looked at the data ultimately and said, okay, we're done. And just change course, you move on. You don't blame the people who made the bad decision, because that doesn't help. You just look at the data and you move on, right?
Yeah.
And that's what we've got to do here. We've got to look at the data, and is it working or not? If it's not working, let's change it. Let's innovate. Let's think big. Let's move on.
Okay. Yeah. No, I agree. The last question, and I don't know if this is something that the insurance commissioner handles. Somebody had asked about what can we do with CCW insurance, but I don't. Is that something that the commissioner handles? Concealed carry weapon permits insurance.
uh yeah, so yeah, I will admit, with the theme of always being transparent and being direct and honest, that's not something I've looked into. So if it's concealed carry weapons insurance, then it probably does have some purview in the insurance department, but it's not. I haven't looked at the challenges there, what's going on there, whether it means that. Look, if it's one more, I imagine it is one more insurance space where it's becoming harder to get insurance, and where prices are going up. So again, I would be happy to have been there as well, which we should, and we should, sure that we help. open up the marketplace, figure out what's going wrong, bring in more competition there for sure. I imagine the same as other areas.
Yeah, I would be surprised if it's something it's if um, I have CCW insurance, but I don't know if there's much else we can do with it. But I appreciate you being completely honest about it. Um, that's
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if it's a lack of competition in the space, you know. And then beyond that, the other piece that it does likely get into, right, is our system of, determining liability if something goes wrong. So,
hmm
yeah, let's face it, if an insurance company is going to get hit with $100 million because somebody unfortunately, got harmed by a gun that was permitted to be carried in some fashion. You know what I'm saying? So we have to
yeah,
look at that too with an open and thoughtful mind about balancing risks, because if a big payout to somebody is making life too expensive for everybody, that's not okay.
yeah,
We've got to change our thinking around that too.
yeah. And I might be mistaken, but I think CCW insurance is more for if you have to use your firearm, it covers your legal expenses. Um,
Right.
I could be wrong, but I think that's all it covers.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
again, Merritt, I really appreciate you coming on. I will close us out with a prayer, and I appreciate you giving us the extra time there at the end. Yeah, that was awesome.
Happy.
That was a good long time. But for everybody that's listening, before I forget and I tune out, please make sure that you share this podcast episode um, with everybody that you can, because uh, you know we see a lot of endorsements out there. I have not seen Merritt's name outside of the Jefferson Club. They were the first ones. So after you interviewed with, I think it was Vincent, he called me
Yep.
immediately and said, "Gio, you guys got to have Merritt Farren on." And I was like, "Dude, I'm I don't have any dates available." My co-host, he hates doing interviews now because we're so like burned out on them. Personally, I love doing interviews, but I can see how everybody's starting to feel a little burned out on it, because when sometimes when you deal with certain politicians, it's just like, man, I've heard all this before. Merritt is not like that. Merritt is not like that. There's a lot of parts in this where I was like holding back from jumping into the conversation because like let him get out everything he wants to say, because I'm getting excited like, oh, you Disney and a lot of the things that you've done are very impressive. So make sure you share it. Please share it.
It's kind of you say, and also listen. It's funny. I mean, I will be absolutely honest and direct. That's all I'm going to be. That's because it fits with my motivation for just being in here to positive change, right? That's all it's about. But it's funny. I had one interview. It was in front of a group of people, and they're like, "Wow, you were, we've been talking to the other people in the race, and you were like so direct and so honest and so candid."
Oh,
Like, yeah, it's another way it should be.
can I ask you, how, why weren't you? So I went to the GOP convention. How come you weren't on the stage?
Yeah, it's because I jumped in too late. So
Okay.
I again only entered the race after I looked at the other candidates and said, these people aren't going to be able to make the change we need. So, you know, again, between my background and my motivation, it just was, it's like it's the time is right for me to do this. God is telling me to do this, right? And I say that without any pridefulness at all, but I do feel that way. It just sort of lined up.
Yeah, spread the word, because this one's very important. We cannot have another catastrophic failure if there's a disaster like a fire again. I mean, Paradise,
Yeah.
Pacific Palisades, Eaton. Like,
Yeah.
this needs to stop. We need to stop allowing um, the politicians that are handling certain offices to continue to do the same things, to have the same responses, to allow the insurance companies to continue to leave California. Our rates keep going up and up and up. There's no real competition here in California, and we're just asking like, why why is it so bad here? Why is it so bad? And nobody's telling us why. Nobody's giving us nobody's giving us any possible solutions. And Merritt isn't even in office, and he's already got an idea that could change the game, just like right out the gate. So it's exciting to hear that. I hope that you get in there, um, even if it's just that one change that you make is going to make a huge difference for California, and I think that alone is going to bring a lot of as with when it comes to home insurance. I think it's going to bring a lot of the rates down, and I think insurance companies will like that too. So
Yeah,
um,
they will. They some will have to be as we Amazon. Some of them will have to dragged into the future. That's just reality, right? I mean, I know from my experience, but they'll come along. It will really be good for them. It will be for
it
them.
will be good for
It'll
them because
provide new business
they're
opportunities
going to make
they
money.
haven't had. That's right.
They're in,
They're going to make more. Yeah, they'll make money because we'll make it more efficient for them all the crew.
yeah, exactly. I mean, they're not running nonprofits. They want to make money, and there's a lot of customers in California. They want to come back, but it has to make sense for them. So, um, it that's where having somebody that understands the business side of it is also important. So
Absolutely.
let's enter a prayer, everybody. I took my hat off out of reverence. You don't have a hat on, so thank you. Heavenly Father, we come before your throne. We thank you for this day. We thank you for allowing us to have the opportunity to meet Merritt Farren today, to be able to hear everything that he has to offer the California voters. And I ask you, Lord, to bless him as he is going out there on the road and introducing himself to Californians, um, to protect his journey wherever he's going, but to also allow him to have the right words um, to be able to get the information out there, that he's trying to do an important job, not just to have revenge for what happened to him at home, but to make a difference, to be able to prove not just to his sons but to others, that the right way to go about um, uh, after having a tragic event happen to you and your family is to go and make a difference so that doesn't affect somebody the way that it affected your household. I also ask you, Lord, for those that have been affected by fires in the Pacific Palisades, the Eaton fires, the Paradise fires, that people are still trying to recover from that almost 10 years ago. Lord, I ask you to bless the paths to be able to get them right back to where they should be at, to allow them the the benefit, the discernment to go through all of the loopholes that they need to go through to be restored. And Lord, as we go through this election, uh, the primaries, I ask you to allow the candidates that need to stand out, that will make a difference, allow them to really shine in these next few weeks, because there's been a lot of manipulation, Lord, and I know that you are shining a light on it, but allow the California voters to really do their research and have the discernment to find the right candidates that are truly going to make a difference here in California and turn things around. In Jesus' name I pray, and we pray. Amen.
In Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank
Thank you,
you so
Gio.
much, Merritt.
That was
I
beautiful.
appreciate you tuning
All
in.
right.
I'm like, my throat is going dry. I'm pausing, like trying to continue, but you are an impressive candidate, Merritt. And I truly hope that everybody gets to see who you are before, even if it's right before they walk into that polling station or at home filling out the bubbles, to go, what is the insurance commissioner? Look you up and go, ooh, that is a good candidate. Um, I hope that everybody gets to see that and you get into the general election by a landslide.
Thank you, Gio. I appreciate that. I'm anxious to get there in there and start helping out. So thank you so much.
I'm anxious for
And
you to
take
get
care.
there
And
too.
that beautiful, beautiful prayer. Thank you for that.
Thank you everybody for tuning in. Tune in tomorrow for Latino Free Minds. It'll be Kristen and myself, and this week we will continue to have more candidates, um, more more impressive candidates. I don't know if they'll be as impressive as Merritt Farren, but there's definitely some amazing candidates to come tomorrow. I plan to have Lorenzo Rios here from the Fresno area. We're gonna do that one in person. It's I think it's the first in-person interview that I've done um, on Latino Free Minds, so I'm excited for that. And then Wednesday, I believe we have Gloria Romero, and Thursday I have Darren Dupont. So tune in every night. We're gonna be here every night, and most importantly, share Merritt Farren because we need him. We need
Thank you,
him up
Gio.
there. Thank you guys for tuning in.